Have you ever wanted to make an interactive map-based application that allows your users to visualize your data and take actions quickly and efficiently? In today's video, I will show you how to build an end-to-end, data-driven, map-based and interactive application in Palantir Foundry. So before we get started, I wanted to walk you through what we're actually going to be building in Foundry. So for a little hypothetical, let's say that I work for the New York City subway system and my job is to kind of keep an eye over the subway stations. So let's say that basically how my job works is people call me up and say, hey, there's an issue at some station. Maybe there's flooding or trash on the ground or something's broken. And my job is to put it into our database and figure out if there's any action required and make a note of that. So to orient you to what you're seeing here, we have a map of New York City with the boroughs colored by population. So not necessarily relevant to this specific workflow, but a nice little lesson in how to use a choropleth in Palantir Foundry. And then we have some of the subway stations in New York City plotted on a map. So we also have some filters on the left-hand side to be able to narrow down to what we're looking at. So say if I want to look at the 6 line, I can see the 6 train snaking up from Manhattan into the Bronx. I can also see the statuses of the subway stations and if they have any issues. So within the 6 train, I have not reported any issues, so there are none. But let me show you what that would look like. So let's say that somebody calls me up and they're reporting an issue out here. So at Lex, I'm going to report that maybe there's a fire, and that's going to be high priority, naturally. I'm going to say that it's a trash can fire. I'm going to submit that. And immediately on the left-hand side, you'll see that we've gone from 0 of them having a subway station entrance issue to 1 of them having a reported issue. And now I want to close it because it's on fire. So I'm going to change the station entrance status to closed. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see that the status immediately changed to closed. All right. So that is the workflow that we're going to be going through today. So keep following along if you want to see how I built this. Now let's begin with 3 projects. So now we have our empty project. So we're going to start by creating some folders inside it to stay organized. So I'm going to create a data folder. Then I'll also make a dashboards folder. Okay, so within the data folder, let's make clean and raw data. Okay, so let's get some data in here. So I'm going to be working with 2 data sets for this example. So I'm going to need the subway station locations, which I'm going to be getting from the MTA. And I will also need some data on the New York City counties so I can color in my map. Now, I have previously downloaded these data sets from their respective sources and will be uploading them from my computer. So we're going to upload files, choose from my computer. I'm going to upload those 2 data sets. Okay, so now we have our data sets. Now let's investigate the raw data to see what sorts of cleaning needs to happen. Now at this point, I think I should mention that uploading the data set as CSVs is one way to ingest data into Palantir Foundry, but there are many other ways to do it. So just for this example, this is what I'm doing. So let's look at the subway station entrances. So first thing I'm seeing So each row here is the entrance of a New York City subway station. So for each station, there are going to be multiple entrances. Looks like this column here, the object ID is our primary key. So there's a couple issues that we're going to have to deal with. So for starters, the primary key is an integer. We're going to want it to be a string. That will be an easy fix. Now, the geom, that is the coordinate of the subway station entrance, we're going to run into a little problem here. So for starters, there's a little bit of there's some extra characters here that are going to get in the way of us actually plotting this. Second of all, these coordinates are backwards as Mapbox would plot them. So because of that, if we were to plot them right now, the subway stations would end up in Antarctica. So that would be probably not what we're going for here. So just taking note here that these are some things I'm going to have to do to clean the data. Okay, now we also have some county data. Okay, so we have a lot of columns here. Probably don't need all of them. Just want to highlight specifically two columns that we're going to be working with. So we have the county FIPS code and the state FIPS code. So Mapbox, when you plot shapes on Mapbox, you're going to be using the Mapbox GeoID, which is composed of the county and state FIPS codes. And so one thing I'm going to have to be doing here is to concatenate these two and add in some extra characters to make sure that it fits the Mapbox format. Now, one more thing I'll have to do is that, again, this is the subway station issues tracker. You'll notice that we don't have any issues data. That's because it doesn't exist yet as far as we're concerned. So I'm going to create an empty data set, and we will be populating that empty data set via write-back actions. So I'm going to make a fusion sheet, which is where I will be creating the schema for our issues. So for the issues, let me give this a name. Okay, so we're going to have an ID, of course. We're going to have a description, a station entrance ID, so we know where the issue is happening. Let's do a priority. And whenever I make any sort of thing that users are going to be adding to, I think it's always nice if we can capture the ID of who's submitting it and the timestamp of when it's submitted. So let's say submitted at, and then submitted by. Maybe also we could have some comments here, might be nice. Okay, so those are our columns. Now let's make a table out of this. So I'm going to say new table. Table 1 seems like a fine name. The range is going to be A1 through G75. Looks about correct. Sync table to data set. Add new table. Okay, so let's make sure that the data types are getting exported exactly as we want them to. So ID, that needs to be a string because it's a primary key. Description, a string. Another ID, also a string. Priority, we're going to make that a string. Could be an integer, but I think I want to do something like high, medium, low. Submitted at, it's going to be a timestamp. Submitted by, a string as well. Comments, also a string. And click save. All right, and that's going to make our table. So now we have our 3 data sets. And again, this one's empty, but it won't be empty for long because we're going to be able to fill it up via write-back. All right, moving on, let's clean our data. So going back to the raw data, we're going to have to make a couple of changes to the subway station entrance data. So let's actually make a code workbook in the clean data set. I'm going to make a new code workbook. So we're going to import data sets. All right. So here we are, we have our subway station entrance data. So here I am in the code workbook, and I am going to create a new transform in Python, which is the language that I'm going to be working in. So let's give this a name. And stations. Going to make sure that we're saving it as a data set. And then, very important, let's make sure that we have the right packages. So we're going to need to import the PySpark functions. So we're going to do that. And then from PySpark okay, so we need those two things. We're going to need our function, and we're going to need the string type so that we can convert the object ID to a string. So first things first, we're going to convert the object ID to a string. All right. All right, so now our object ID is a string. Nice. So there's a couple of other things that we're going to have to do to finish cleaning our data. So first, we're going to have to make sure that this has nothing else but the Latin lon in it, and then we have to flip it, again, as I was mentioning. So we will do that. Okay, and then next thing, now that we have the code to just extract the coordinates, we will flip them. Okay, so looks like no syntax issues. So let's run that and get rid of some extra spaces. Let's run that and see if it works. Oops. Well, looks like I have an error. Unsurprising because I forgot an entire argument in the split. So we need a delimiter argument. So let's make that happen. Okay, so we're just going to be using the space delimiter, and then now let's run that and see if it works. All right, I made one more mistake. So the code ran, but didn't actually flip the coordinates because, so you'll see coordinates are still in Antarctica as Mapbox would plot them. This has to be a 1 and this has to be a 0. And then after this, we will be good to go. Okay, so now our coordinates are flipped properly and we are ready to go with this one. So let me also give this to CodeWork a name so that we can remember what it's for. So station cleanings, or station data cleaning. Let's make that clear. Okay, so that data, that's done. So we have another data set to clean. We've got to clean the county data. So let's go do that. So I'm going to do that in Pipeline Builder just to show you another example of a tool that you can use. So I'm going to make a new pipeline. So pipeline, I can do a lot of the same things that I would in Code Workbooks, except it's point and click. So we're going to do a batch pipeline. Because we're not working with streaming data here. Let me also give this a name. Nope, that's not subway stations. My bad. This is counties. Counties cleaning. So we're going to add Foundry datasets. Oops, not from the clean, from the raw. Okay, so let's get that county data in there. And then we are going to add that data set. So good news, there's not a ton we have to do here, but Mapbox GUIDs follow a standard format of USA, all caps, number 2, and then the state FIPS code, and then the county FIPS code. So let's make that happen. So we're going to do the transform operation. And then we are going to do concatenate. That's all we have to do. So the separator here, we don't really need a separator because it's all just going to be smashed together. And so we're going to be adding a mix of static strings and columns. So for the value, it's going to be USA 2. And then so we have that, and then we have to also have the state code and the county code. Nice, so we're gonna click apply. Let's also give it a name that we understand. How about Mapbox GUID? Apply. All right, so, oh, maybe it's at the beginning. Here it is. Okay, so here we are. That looks great to me. So I think that we're all done for this one. So we're going to add a pipeline output. Make a data set. And let's give it a name. Cleaned counties. And then let's get rid of some of these columns. We definitely don't need all of them. I think that all we really want here is probably the population estimates for now. Just to give the map a little color. I'm gonna get rid of all of these. Okay, also don't think I need that one or the division, not the region. Probably also just the estimate for 2021. Okay, so we're probably good on there. Then we can use that updated schema. First, I'm going to save it. All right, now we're going to deploy our pipeline so that we can have a data set. Okay, so now we can take a look at our pipeline. So let's just take a look at the data set. So that's building right now, so it's going to take a second. In the meantime, let's start setting up our objects. So in order to build this interactive application in Workshop, we're going to have objects. So let's go do that. So we're going to go into Ontology Manager. So we're going to be making several objects. So we're going to be having the subway station entrance, the county, and the issues. So first, let's start with the subway station entrance. Let's go to recent files. So I'm going to have the clean stations. I'm going to select that and click next. Let's give this an icon. I like the train one. Give it a color. And then click next. And then use a primary key. So we're going to use the object ID for that. And then the name. So the name is not going to be a primary key because the same station can have a lot of different entrances. But it will still look better as, the face of the object. So we're going to create that. And so that's our object. So we have that. And let's also make sure that we can edit it. So we're going to have the data sources. And let's make sure that we have a write back data set. Save it in also let's save it in the raw folder. Let's save it in the write back data set. Wrong project. Okay. So now we have our data there. So I actually forgot something here. So in the properties, we have all of these things, except we're missing something, which is a status. So, I probably want to know if the station's closed. And maybe if it has too many issues, I want to be able to shut it down. So let's go back to my code workbook and add in an empty column so that we can add a status, because right now we don't have any place to put that status. So just a column of, let's just say this station's default to open, and then we can change them if we need to. Clean stations. Let's make it all caps so it looks nice. Okay, so now we added in a column, and then I will be able to actually update the status of that station. All right, so while that's running, I'm going to go configure another object, and then I'm going to be able to add in that extra property. So going back here into the Ontology Management application, let's create the county. So we have our clean county data set. Then next, let's see, can I have a little map? Ooh, okay, so we're going to have a map. Here we go. All right, so we're going to have a map icon for this, give it a color. And then I'm going to give it its primary key, which is going to be the Mapbox GeoID. And then the title, which should be the name. I think I actually took out the county name. That's fine though. We don't necessarily need that for now. So I'm going to make the title the Mapbox GeoID. I might go back and change that later. So let's create that. And then I don't need a write back data set for this because I'm not going to change anything about the county populations because that's not what we're working on here. Now, I actually forgot to do something in the subway station's object configuration. So I'm going to go do that, and it's pretty important. In fact, the map won't work without it. So you'll see here in the properties, I have the coordinates. So when you're working with coordinates in Foundry, you have to tell Foundry that it's expecting a geohash. And I did not do that. So here we are. So now we can say that the flip coordinates are going to be a geohash. And to be clear, you only need to do that if you're trying to plot points. You can also do that for geoshapes, but we're not working with geoshapes for now. So we have that. Oh, look, we have our status column as well. So I will be adding that in. So let's map the status as a property so you can see what that process looks like when I'm adding new things in. And then we're all good. So we're going to save that. Now I'm not quite done with my ontology. So I have the stations, I have the counties. I also might want to add in the county name to the county object. So I might do that. But first I'm going to create my issues object. So for the issues, we're going to use the empty backing data set, which was the issue. So it's just a schema for now. So we have the, oh, that's the clean data, wrong folder. Issues. Okay, here we have that. Just gonna select that and next. Let's give this a nice little icon. Okay, primary key. We're gonna use our ID. Title. Let's use the description because that's gonna be more interesting to our viewers. So now we have all three of our objects. So we're not quite done yet with the actual configuration. So we also need some links because, you know, an issue is not particularly interesting unless I know which station it's associated with. And good news is I had the foresight to make sure that we have a foreign key here. Also, this object name, I don't like that. Let's give this a better name. How about? Okay, so now that this has a better name. So what I was saying is that we want to have a link between issues and subway station entrances because that's what keeps it interesting. And again, you know, this is going to be a many to one linkage because, you know, one subway station, as you might have seen, can have multiple issues. So we have a foreign key in the station entrance ID, and that's what we're going to be using to link them to each other. So we're going to go make a link now that we have all of our objects. Okay, so we have so we're going to say that one subway station entrance. Oh no, one. Whoops, where's my object? It's called clean stations, that's why. So the foreign key here is going to be I have this backwards. Okay, so we're going to do one subway station to many issues. Okay, so here on the left-hand side, we're going to be using the primary key by default, which is the object ID. And then on this side, which is the many side, we're going to be using the subway station entrance ID. So this will actually enable us to associate issues with subway station entrances. So let's save this. Great, and so now we have our objects. We will still have to make actions, but we don't have to do that quite yet. Let's first go over to Workshop. So I'm going to take us into Workshop. We're going to make a brand new one, new module. It's gonna make sure we're saving in our project. Subway Station Issues Manager. And then I'm going to put that in our, let me just go search for the project. Okay, so we have a dashboard, let's save it there. All right, so we're gonna make a dashboard. First things first, why don't we make this dark mode? There we go, that's nice. You know, give it a little icon in the corner. Gonna do a train. Beautiful. Okay, let's also just add some labels so we can keep staying organized. So we're going to have let's call this our issues map. That's what we're going to put there. And then we have filters here. So first things first, let's make a map. Map, here we go. Well, it's not terribly interesting because we don't have any subway stations on there yet. So we're going to be able to fill out this map with variables. So we're going to create variables. And then, so we're going to have an object set. Our object set is going to be the, let's say, filtered subway. And you'll see why I'm doing that. So the starting object set will be in stations, and then, so we're going to have that. And you might be wondering why I'm calling it filtered subway stations. That's because I want to have it be filtered. And so I'm also going to have an object set to be powering the filters. So we're going to have another object set called raw subway. Actually, let's call it unfiltered just so we don't get it confused with, raws and raw data. Okay. So I'll make use of this actual unfiltered variable in a minute. First things first is I'm going to put a filter widget, filter list. Let's also give this an icon in the title. So in the section header. Okay. So when we put configure a filter, we're going to make it backed by an object set. And this is going to be backed by the unfiltered subway stations. So the reason why I have an unfiltered object set and a filtered one is that if I'm backing my filters with the filtered object set, it will create a feedback loop, which sometimes in some circumstances might be what you're looking for. But in our cases, it will probably lead to some unexpected behavior. So we're not going to do that. Let's add some filters. I like the idea of adding maybe the line might be nice. And then the probably don't need flipped coordinates. How about a status? Right now they're all going to be open. And a name might be nice. You can do I don't think I like this as a histogram. Let's do a keyword search so I can, just search for part of the name of the station. And I think that will probably be enough filters for now. So let's populate our map. Also, okay, so before we do the map, let's make sure that the filters actually do something. So we have the output of the filters, which is stored as a filter output variable. Let's give it a name. So filter output, and then let's also apply the filter. So we have the filtered subway stations. We're going to filter using a variable. This is the only filter variable that exists, so we can choose that one. Now let's do some plotting. So first things first, let's get some color on this map just to make it a little bit more interesting. So we need yet another object set for that. We're going to use the counties. So for that object set, I'm going to say counties. Actually, let's call it NYC counties because I really don't want every county in the US. Let's just start with New York City. Okay, so we have clean counties. And then I'm going to filter just for counties in New York City. So in order to do that properly, I don't know the county FIPS codes off the top of my head. So I might want to actually go add in the county name as a property on the object. So I'm going to go add that in real quickly and I will be right back. Okay, so I just added that in pipeline builder. So we have our properties. Let's go edit the property mappings because we have a couple of new ones. We have the county name. Great. I also took away the estimates for 2020 because I don't need those. So just in pipeline builder doing a little cleanup. I also want to change my object names. These aren't great practice for object names because it's called a cleaned county and it's probably going to be more human understandable if I give it a more, a more real world name, something like USA counties. How about? Also notice I'm going to have to do a reindex here because I dropped a column. And so Phonograph is expecting a column that I didn't give it. And so that's why that happened. So not a big deal. I'm also going to rename a couple of other things. So clean station, again, not a great name for an object. Let's call it NYC station entrances. Now, so the object ID is going to stay the same. So this isn't actually going to break anything. Just wanted to flag that. All right, I'll make sure issues also has a good name because it looks like I didn't. Okay, that does have a nice one. Okay, so now that we have that, let me go ahead and save those changes. All right, cool. So I'm going to go back into Workshop and then I am going to be able to proceed. All right, back in Workshop. So now I'll be able to filter the counties on something that actually makes sense to me. So we're going to filter for two things. One is that the state name is New York. Because if I just filter by name or even the FIPS code, I'm not going to necessarily, for example, Brooklyn is Kings County. There's probably another Kings County somewhere in the United States. So I would not necessarily filter out everything I want to. So we have 63 remaining. I'm also going to filter on the county name. So funny thing, I actually know all the county names. So we have Kings. And then we have Bronx County. And then Queens County. Whoops. Yeah. And then, Then New York County for Manhattan. And then the last thing we have Staten Island, which is Richmond County. Oops. Okay. So that's going to be, so here we have the 5 counties that we're expecting. And so let's put them on our app. So for today's mapping, we're going to be doing a choropleth. And a choropleth, if you are not familiar, is where we color in geographic boundaries with colors according to properties. So here we are in beautiful New York City. So we're going to add a data layer. Let me give it a name. So we're going to call this counties. Let's say county pops. We're going to be plotting the NYC counties. Then, so I'm going to set up a point. We're going to do a choropleth. It's going to be non-aggregated choropleth. Region ID is going to be our Mapbox GeoID. And then we're going to put down US counties as the source configuration ID. And then we're going to figure out how to color this. So we're going to color it by the population estimates. Beautiful. Okay, so here we are. We have the colored in counties of New York City according to their population. So let's go with that. And then let's also add in the subway stations as points. So I'm going to save this. In Workshop, you have to save your work. So I already have the clean stations variable. Very nice. So I'm going to add another layer onto this map. So we're going to add the station entrances, give that layer a name, and then map the filtered subway stations. And it's going to be a point this time. And so remember how I told Foundry that it was expecting a geohash? So now it knows to surface this when I can select a geohash property. So I'm going to click that. All right, so here we have lots of subway stations. We have a nice, colorful map here. And, I could change the icon if I want to, but I feel like these dots are just fine. It's kind of cool when I can select a train line and kind of see the subway stations for that line snaking around the city. So we have our map. So now we're missing something though. Right now we don't actually have any way to report station issues, right? So now is where we actually, bring those into the picture. Let me also rename the map because it's not exactly an issues map. It's a subway station entrances. Okay, I'm gonna save that. So let's make this basically what I want the workflow to be is I want to be able to, have the operator click on a subway station and basically use that to select the station entrance object and then report an issue about that. So first things first, let's go make actions. Actually, let's make a button so you can know why I'm making the actions. So we're going to have a button called report station issue. So the intent, let's make it danger. It's going to be red. You can give it the issue icon. Let's do it with add. And then we can, let's style a button a little bit. So we can style these buttons to be, we can do a little minimal style. Let's do that. It's nice. And then I'm also going to have a change station status. Station entrance status. Let's make this, let's see the primary intent. So this is going to make it blue. And I can give this an icon. Let's do the edit icon. Nice. Okay. So now we have our buttons. And, well, they don't do anything right now. So let's change that. So there's a couple of things we can get our buttons to do. So on the click, we can make an event happen, which is going to be when we click the button and it makes the page do something, like open another page or open a drawer. But in our case, we're going to do an action, but we don't have an action yet. So we're going to have to go add one. So now that's going to take us back to the Ontology management application. And we're going to go to actions. So we're going to create a new action. It's going to be, we have to first pick the object that it has to do with. So this is going to be about, oh, I got to go enable edits. I will do that real fast. So quickly, let's enable edits. And when it says enable edits, that just means I need to have a data set for it to land in. Let's put it in the, great, so now we have our data set. And now I can go create this action. So we have the issue. And then I'm going to, so we can make it so that I add a new object or I can modify something. For now, this is going to be an add object. Next. So first things first, every object needs a primary key. Good news is we can automatically generate a primary key for the ID. The ID doesn't need to particularly be human readable. It just has to be unique. And so that's good. So then we're going to add properties for the user to fill out. So they're going to need to fill out the station entrance ID, the description, the priority, the comments submitted at and submitted by. So for this one, for submitted at, that's something that we should just collect automatically. There's really no reason for the user to have to input the time. So we're just going to have submitted at collect the current time. For submitted by, it should just be the current user, right? There's no reason they should have to write their name. It can just collect that and document the user ID that it was submitted from. So we're going to go next. Action type name, we definitely need a name. New, makes capitalized, subway, station, entrance, issue. What a mouthful. Next, so we can also pick who actually can execute this action, which is super important if you have, any sort of action that's changing something that should be protected. So say for this one, we might want to, I don't have these groups configured yet, but it would be something like only subway station administrators can execute this action. So I'm going to create the action. All right. So I have to have at least one submission criteria. So let's just say that it has to be me. So let's just say that the current user, or let's just say the group includes admins. All right. That will do it for me. So for the rules, we already have those. And just to kind of, in case you didn't understand what rules are doing, so these are just the things that are going to be filled out when I do the action. It doesn't necessarily say how I'm going to fill them out. That's what happens in the form section. So the form is actually how this surfaces for the user. So basically like how this actually manifests on the front end. And so we're seeing here, this is the way the form looks right now. There are probably some things we want to change. So for starters, the station entrance ID, this should be an object dropdown, right? Like, for the station entrance IDs, they're not super human readable. And so we just want to be able to reference the object. So for the object type. Okay, so when this happens that way, we can have this to search for instead of the object ID, which is a lot nicer. And that will directly reference the object so that we can have these objects be linking together. So let's also, we don't need to call this an ID on the front end. Let's call it station entrance. And then the description, that looks fine to me. It's required. You can't submit an issue if you don't describe it. The priority. So for the priority, I don't really think that the user should have too many choices about this. So let's make this a multiple choice. And so we're going to say it can be high, medium, or low. And that way we can have nicer data when the user submits. I want to also change the order of these, I feel. That makes more sense to me. I don't think we need another value. I think this also has to be required. Then we're going to have the comments. Maybe if the user has a lot to say, we should give them the ability to say it all. So we're going to make the text area so they have a little more room to be wordy. I don't think it should be required though. So I'm going to make that optional. So see the little asterisk disappeared. Submitted at, submitted by. We don't need these here because we're filling those out automatically. So we're just going to take these off the form because we're already filling them out automatically. Awesome. So that looks like a great form to me. So we're going to save that. Now I need one more issue after this. And mind you, remember that empty data set that I used to back the issues object? We're going to be able to start populating data using this issue. The new action type, now we're going to look at the station entrances and we're going to modify. So for the only property we want to modify is the status. Everything else is static. We're not going to change the coordinates of a station, for example. And click next. The action type is change subway station entrance status. It's long, but it is descriptive. Let's add the validation here. This is just going to be the admins. And then create. Okay, this one's simple. There's one property that the user needs to change. It's status. For the form, the user is going to be able to see a subway station entrance and then select it. So this is by default an object reference because we have to know which object we're changing properties of. For status, I think that this should be multiple choice. Let's add, say, open, closed, and then maybe needs repairs, something like that. So we're going to save that, and then we have our action. This has to be mandatory. So if they're taking this action, they'd best fill it out. So we're going to save that, and then we're going to be able to go add those buttons to our workshop. So here I am back in my pretty map. Let's actually also change the color of this map. Why not? So I'm going to go to the county populations just to show you that I can do this. The yellow maroon is nice, but I prefer it to be purple. Lovely. Okay, so those buttons. If you're wondering where your buttons went, it's because they did not have room to surface. Okay, so let's go edit the buttons. It's not that they didn't have room, it's that I clicked a button. Okay, now they're back. So here we are. Let's make the buttons do something. So on click, it's going to be an action. The action is going to be, so it's going to be the issue, submit new station issue. Okay, so now if I click on that, the dialog box pops up and I can fill it out. Now here's the problem. I have a lot of options here. So, what if I want to be able to auto-populate this based off of the map? That might be nice for our user. Otherwise, this looks pretty good to me. So let's just say I want to, as the user, be able to select this from a map. So you'll see that if I click, I clicked a couple there, but let me zoom in and I can show you how if I click just one station, it's going to store the output. So we have J Street and York Street at the southwest corner. Now, how do I actually collect this and make sure that it's stored in, as a variable so that we can populate that field in the action? So let's go to the station entrances. So we're going to make sure that when we select something that it's stored. We're going to make a new variable. It's going to be the selection or filters from map selection. All right, so I want to make it so that when so here, so you see what happens when I click some of these dots. You're going to see that I have the ability to actually see what data it's grabbed. So then I can use that to filter down to a single point to fill out that action. So let's go make an object set. So I'm going to make yet another object set called selected station from map. And then, so for the starting object set, we have the filtered subway stations, filter using variable. Okay, so now we have just one object. So that's how I can actually grab an object from the map and store that as a variable. And so the reason I want to store that as a variable is so I can auto-populate my action. So in the report station entrance issue, we're going to select a default to configure. And so see here, I can set the default to be one of the variables in this workshop. And so I'm going to choose that one. All right, so just to show you how that works, so see how I've selected J Street and York Street. If I click submit station issue, it's auto-populated. Now, the user can still change it if for whatever reason they want to. That's totally fine. But if the user wants the ability to pick the station based off of something they're seeing in the map, this is a good way to do it. Okay, so we have that, and then we have the change station entrance status. Now, chances are, if the user is reporting an issue at a station, they probably want to be able to change the status. So let's make sure that they can do that. So we're going to go to the other button and give that an action. And then I'm going to select an action. Okay, so for the parameter defaults, there's just one that we need to set, and that's going to be the selected stations from map. Okay, so now to see here, I can actually change the status of the station. So let's show this in action. So let's say that I am, so I'm taking in my calls or whatnot, and I want to be able to report an issue at J Street and York Street. So I'm going to report a station issue. Let's say the station is flooding. Priority sounds like a big deal. Hi. I don't necessarily need any comments. So I'm going to submit that. All right. So what you will see immediately if I add another filter here. Let's allow the user to be able to filter for if the subway station entrance has issues. So now that I added in that filter, you can see that I now have one subway station that has an issue, and I can filter on that. So let's add a couple more just for fun. Also, I should probably close that one, shouldn't I? I don't need that one. So I'm also going to change this entrance to being closed because it's flooding. Okay, great. So now you'll see immediately on this side, the status, there's one that is now closed. Great. Okay, so now we have so just to summarize what we've done here, we have ingested data. We have cleaned the data in two separate ways, both in Code Workbooks and in Pipeline Builder. We have created ontology objects. We've created a map. And lastly, we created actions to make this workflow interactive. And of course, last thing, we're going to want to save our work. Wonderful. Let's also put this into view mode so we can see how nice it really is. The map looks so much better in full size. Maybe we can also change the color of the icon to be if it has issues. That might be nice. Let's see if we can do that. So if we color by property value, so we can color by the status. That might be a nice thing to do. All right, and so there's only one of them's already closed, but let's just say that if it's closed, then it will be red. Oh, you can see that. That one in Brooklyn is closed. So that's the one that we just closed. All right. Well, hope you found this useful and look forward to hearing what sorts of map-based applications you can build out.